morning. At the tail end of yesterday's episode, we got rained out. The overnight rain total ended up about 1/2 of an inch, anywhere to 3/4 of an inch. So 12 to 18 or 19 millimeters for you Europeans out there that watch these videos. All things considered, it was actually a perfect rain, other than the fact that we didn't get all of our beans in the ground beforehand. Other than an odd spot here or there, there's really no water standing at all. Sun's supposed to come back out today and it's going to be in the 60s, so we may actually be able to farm again tomorrow. If you look very closely out there, you can see in the first field of soybeans I planted, the Asgrow 33 XF3s are out of the ground. The soldiers are starting their war for the year. The same can be said for the corn across the lane. I don't know what hybrid this is off the top of my head. The hybrid and the variety are really irrelevant to them being emerged. That's more of a result of planting date and soil temperature than anything else. Basically, we can surmise that the soil temperature is above 50 degrees Fahrenheit for both our corn and soybeans, because that is the minimum temperature they need to germinate and grow. And growing is exactly what they're doing, so I bet it's way beyond 50. It may be even closer to 60, though it will cool down over the next week as the average temperature kind of drops a little bit. By far the most important thing, bar none, that happened overnight was that I got 9 hours of sleep, and I probably could have done an additional 9 hours. I just needed to get to work and start doing some maintenance, because like I said, we could be farming again tomorrow. Ran by Mom and Dad's house to pick up some supplies for the day, and I noticed my dad had used an interesting method for securing the conveyor from wind. That's probably the simplest yet most effective thing you could have done. Without a doubt, that is much easier than moving a bunch of 50 to 100 pound tractor weights and setting it on the tongue. That is definitely one of the most Marty things I've seen today. Maybe even this week, I don't know. That's pretty impressive. I grew tired of buying repackaged and overpriced T-Jet products at the John Deere dealership, so I called Jensen Spray Equipment, put in an order for a bunch of these 5-way nozzles that I keep breaking inadvertently, and of course they were about half the price of the ones that come in the John Deere box. Since I was already obviously in the spending mood, I went ahead and made a leap and purchased something else I think might be kind of handy. Here's my purchase, 3-inch Banjo inline flow meter. So we know how much we're pumping through the pressure side and don't even have to really keep an eye on the sight glass on the sprayer. Just kidding, we should probably still do that. I asked the guy at Jensen's how this worked. He said it's some kind of electromagnetic deal. I said, so pretty much magic. He said, yeah, that's a good way to put it. He claims they're very accurate. They can keep up with almost 500 or 600 gallon per minute of flow, which we're not even capable of half of that, and they can handle 32% in other products. So we're going to get this installed today while we have some time and see how fancy it actually is. I had to throw on an extra layer because it's a little cooler this morning. Not quite the 75 we had yesterday. It's in the 50s right now, though it is supposed to warm up. Currently, I'm driving around checking fields, which is really just Spanish for finding the courage to go start working. Alrighty, the only way to get finished is to get started first. Either I found the motivation or the caffeine's kicking in. It's kind of the same thing. I'm gonna start my maintenance on the Hagee because it'll definitely be the first thing that sees the field after it dries up a little bit. There's been a few issues that I've been trying to work around for the last couple days of spraying soybean residual herbicides. I'm gonna try and get those adjusted so they don't give me trouble. Birds making a nest in my Hagee already. Go ahead and check the oil on this. It's like a Lamborghini. Engine's in the back. Huh, they made that easy to get to. Yep, it's got plenty. I'll be the first one to admit that I am not even close to an expert at regular service on a Hagee like this. If you guys operate one of these or are familiar with them, put in the comments below if there's something you don't see me doing that I should be doing, other than grease it, because I'm about to do that. I really would appreciate any kind of knowledge you guys may have. How much fuel do we have? We should have a lot. 7/8 a tank? No, not quite. Between 3/4 and 7/8. What is that, 13/16? Let's move this out and get the boom unfolded. That's where all the trouble is. I think I have enough room to unfold here. You see this error code right here? That is in reference to this boom that's not all the way unfolded. It's got the 2 pins that latch in hydraulically there, right where it folds out. That's what was giving me trouble folding in the last few days, so I loosened them up, and now I've got it out of alignment to where the bottom one that I've loosened will not pin through, locking the boom in place. I'm learning. I know we're gonna need this. Top one's definitely aligned. It's not been giving me any issues. The bottom one I just didn't have in the right spot. I loosened it, but I never tightened it, allowing that eye bolt to kind of shift a little bit, and it's just banging when it's trying to unfold. Oh, great. Now I've done it. My wrench is stuck in there. Son of a gun. Never mind, I got off a little force. I thought I was gonna have to fold the boom back up. The problem I'm running into is that I don't know exactly where I need that adjusted at. It's a very minimal amount of room for extra clearance. Last time I thought I had it in a good place and I tightened it and then it got stuck again, so I loosened it, which put me in the same predicament. I'm just gonna tighten it where it is and hope that it works. If it doesn't fold up, I'll just keep the wrench on hand. I may just duct tape the wrench right here so it's ready to go when it inevitably happens. Now I just need to grease the snot out of it. That's on the list. I'm hitting the fold button. It's saying it's complete, which means it must be locked. I don't see any reason why it wouldn't just fold up freely. Yeah. It probably needs banged around in the field before it'll get stuck again. Okay, it's time to inspect our nozzles. I'm going to pull completely on the rock so I don't inadvertently kill any of the yard. I'm only going to run water through though. Just do a little check over. Okay, that looks good. Switch to water, our rinse tank. Then we're going to turn the pump on. Then we're going to go to manual. Then we're going to run the pressure up just a little bit. If you watch this right here while I click the button, that is the pressure on the solution pump. I guess it's not pumping solution, it's pumping water from the rinse tank. 37 pounds should be plenty. And then you just hit this magical green button right here. It's the master switch. When I pop it, it should start spraying. Well, it's not spraying. I wonder if I even have water in my rinse tank. It's rather difficult to tell. It looks like there's water in there. This is my sight glass for the rinse tank. I don't know how you can see much anything. Both this and the solution tank sight tubes need to be taken off and cleaned, or at least just replaced completely. Try this one more time. I'm not going to waste herbicide on the rock. It's not going to hurt anything because we're not trying to grow crops here. If anything, we're trying to not have weeds in the drive. It doesn't look like it's building pressure. Nothing's turning on, so we must be out in the rinse tank. Oh well. I think this tip over here was bad, so I may just go ahead and replace it now that I've got those cheap parts. I've still yet to take this camera mount off the boom. It's almost a memoriam of the camera we lost a couple days ago. Still has yet to be recovered. Hopefully if someone found it, it's a child, and it makes all of his dreams come true. Hopefully it's the nozzle body that's broken and not this end cap, because those are kind of expensive. Whatever caused the damage on the end here may or may not have also broken this fence row nozzle. It is also most likely the same occurrence that broke my tensioner. Talk about that in a second. I'm just gonna go ahead and replace this because normally it's the nozzle body that's bad. Something was definitely leaking over here. Well, if that was the problem, it is now fixed. Hard to make any money spraying when you break something every field. This thing's too young to have a limp tip on the end, so that still seems kind of light. Give it one more round of ratcheting. Okay, Chris and I got this mostly adjusted. We did a little bit of a haphazard job when we fixed it out in the field the other day. There was a bracket that we didn't put in place at the right stage. We went ahead and just took it apart and put it back on because that's the right way to do things. Also had to shed a layer because it's starting to warm up and get a little humid. I'm gonna zip around this and grease probably the million grease zerks on it. I'm not going to swear on any graves by any means. I do think I've got everything greased, so we'll fold it up. We'll just keep our ear out for the grease alarm. If we hear that start to go off, we know we missed something. Time to put this away for now, work on other projects. I was just giving Jeff's 9620R and field cultivator a once over, and I wanted to comment about how well we extracted our value from this field cultivator sweep. It's actually impressive that it wore down that far without breaking. Usually they get a hole in them somewhere and then they just fall apart. This one's holding on till the end.
Okay, it's been a few hours. I ran a few errands as well as greased my planter. That way I'm ready to rock and roll once it dries out. Sun's shining and it's actually a relatively beautiful day. I think we will need another day or two to dry things off, even to get the sprayer out. I'm imagining that the sprayer is going to be the first thing to go. Normally a rig like that on floaters can cross the ground without making a mess prior to a heavy planter. Unfortunately, I do have some bad news about my 3-inch inline meter. I guess I didn't do my due diligence properly. I thought I could just punch it in here somewhere and it'd be good to go. I read that for it to be 100% accurate, it needs 30 inches on either side of straight tubing, meaning that anywhere in this line with any kind of a crook in it is not a good spot for it. So even right out of the pump there is not technically straight. I'm definitely planning on installing this because I think it'd be a lot of help, and I spent over $1,000 on it, so I'd like for it to work. One thing I am planning on adding additionally, if I drum up the courage and the finances to do so, is one of those powered hose reels. I think it'd be much easier for moving the hose in and out. And there's times where the 15 to 20 foot of hose I have here isn't really enough to load without getting dangerously close to a ditch or to power lines. So I would like to increase the length of that to make it easier for the spray tender operations. In the process, I can probably throw this on somewhere. Either way, it is in the works, I guess, just not today.
Before I take off for what is most likely going to be a weekend of relaxation, I do want to talk really quickly about our corn that's popping out of the ground. There's a bunch of little beans popping out as well. They just don't look as cool or as uniform as the corn does.
This is gonna seem like a relatively straightforward point, but it needs to be mentioned. Because our corn and our soybeans are now above the ground, they are now susceptible to frost damage. I know what you're thinking, Andy, that doesn't matter. You planted it, it's warm, nothing bad can happen, right? It's spring.
Not exactly. The good news is that there's no rain in the forecast. The bad news is that next Monday, 3 days from now, the low temperature is 32 degrees.
Therein lies the problem. 32 degrees is freezing. Freezing is bad for our emerged crops. More so for our soybeans than our corn. Either way, it's not ideal. One thing we definitely have going for us is that on top of our above average soil temperatures providing some residual warmth from the ground upwards, the temperature actually needs to drop probably to 30 degrees to cause major damage. At 32, we may see some light frost damage on edges of the field or places where there's not a lot of airflow. Wind is actually your friend when the temperature is low. It keeps that air moving around and doesn't allow it to settle and freeze in certain locations. That is something that we'll have to keep an eye on, but at the end of the day, there's really nothing we can do other than supervise and assess the damage if anything bad happens. I'm actually more worried about my sprayer and tanker at 32 degrees Fahrenheit than I am about our corn and soybeans. I do believe that there is a possibility that we may get some injury. Soybeans will die if they get a frost. Corn actually has its growing point below the ground. The above ground tissue could possibly die. Within a couple of days or maybe a week, depending on the temperature, you will see new growth coming out on top. Most of the data I've seen on frost damage on corn is hit or miss. It's really all about the timing. If it happens at this stage, one could argue that you may lose some top end yield potential because of that damage. Another person will say you didn't give up much at all because it's still so early in the growing season. You're really not replacing that much GDU accumulation or growth. Like I've already mentioned, if soybeans get a frost, probably 29 to 30 degrees is the point at which they'll definitely die. You will lose the plant because their growing point is at the top as they unfurl out of the ground. Again, just like corn, the data is going to be a little hit or miss. The damage will kill the beans, but we are still in late April, and I think that we will get an opportunity to plant again in the next couple days. So if there is a frost, we're not going to be giving up that much growing time. Growing time is what's crucial to high-yielding soybeans other than timely rains in August. You need them to grow, get out of the ground, and vegetate because you only have so much day length to make use of before they start their reproductive cycle and ultimately mature and harvest. That's the logic that drives us to plant early, get them in the ground. These actually were not planted abnormally early by any means. Our technical insurance date where we're covered for replant is right at the beginning of April. I think it's the 4th or the 5th. We did not plant anything before then. So in the eyes of our insurance policies, We did everything as kosher as possible. Mother Nature just doesn't always cooperate. I'm optimistic that we're actually not going to have much damage at all unless it drops off a couple degrees cooler, but we'll wait and see what happens. I guess I should mention the insurance date a little bit more because that's probably foreign to a lot of you. The insurance date is the first day you are covered for replant insurance on your crops. Traditionally in our region, corn and soybeans were not the same date. Corn was like the first week of April. Soybeans were the 10th or the 15th. I don't even remember. Just last year, you could buy up additional coverage that allowed earlier planting. All that basically does is if you plant that day or after, you are covered for replant costs. Now, it's not tremendous insurance. It does help offset some of the equipment expense and possibly minor yield loss. Not much more than that. You're not going to make any money replanting. There's no insurance game going on here. I think it's safe to venture to say that the insurance date is just a statistical analysis from insurance companies of when they're going to profit off of their policies based on average growing conditions over the last few years or even decades. Basically, it indicates that that early week of April is a safe time to start planting. Anytime from the start of your insurance date on, you're covered for those expenses. If you plant before, you're not breaking any laws unless you lie about your planting date. All you're doing is just not getting that coverage because you planted earlier than your federal crop policies provide any kind of incentives for insurance coverage. To be honest, I'm not sure about the implications of your planting date and your final yield protection. There is a lot of insurance out there that protects against crop and price loss. I think if you plant before, you still maintain federal crop yield revenue protection. You just don't have the opportunity to get replant insurance. It's bright and somewhat early on Monday morning. We're back at the farm after an early morning frost. Hello, dog. Look at that tail wiggle in the morning. The frost didn't slow her down at all. Always gotta pet the dogs for good luck. Her older counterpart Chassie's in the house with some knee issues. Age catches up to us all. I wasn't standing out in our emerged corn or soybean fields by any means. My phone showed that the temperature got down to about 31. Definitely low enough to cause some damage if the wind was rather tame, which I think it was, especially around the edges of the field. We'll just have to wait and see what happens with that. We won't be able to tell for probably a day or two. Those plants will become kind of limp. Other than the frost potentially hurting some of our crops that are out of the ground, it also is going to bring up a lot of moisture starting about 8 a.m. today, just because the sun's going to be shining, clear skies, should burn some of that residual H2O out of the topsoil. Got about 1,000 acres of soybean residual I'd like to spray today. It appears that our tanker trailer is as excited as myself to start working on this nice chilly morning. Back brakes were sticking a little bit. Been a problem at the start of the day since we've got it. Definitely need to run it into a shop and have them look at the brakes. I don't know if there's an air leak somewhere that's gotten worse, or if the brakes are just old and stuck up. Could be one of the two, or another possible option. I'm not a truck mechanic or expert by any means, and I'm not going to pretend to be. We had room over at the red shed to squeeze the tanker in. It's not insulated over there. The temperature was only going to dip below 32 for probably less than an hour or two. Weren't concerned about the temperature dropping off enough in there to freeze up any of the liquid in the pump or the bottom of the tank, so that was a good spot for that. The Hagee, though, it got the premium parking, the seed shed. And it barely fit in here. There was inches to spare, literally. Checked the oil a few days ago, and it's not run any more than a couple minutes since then, so I'm gonna go ahead and start it, although I've already forgotten to turn the battery on. There goes my brother-in-law Nate in the tanker to pick up a hot load. We're going up to spray the 300 acres where I got rained out the other day. I cannot emphasize enough how little room there was to spare. Between the 6,000 receiver, maybe the beacons, the tallest point on this machine, you're almost touching the overhead door. That's not a good sign for our stuff that's out of the ground. Got cold enough last night to kill these dandelions, or at least severely maim them. They're all coiled up. Okay, I gave the Hagee a couple of minutes to warm up before I hit the road. The tanker has a little bit of a head start in terms of geography because it's going to be almost up in the area where we're headed. We're going to be going to the east to Lerna and then up north on Lerna Road to get us to this farm. Trying not to back all over my mom and dad's yard, but it's not going very well. Anyways, got a lot of acres on the docket today. It'd be nice to knock them out. Not gonna hold my breath because sometimes you're just not as productive as you'd like to be. we're gonna hit the road. Alrighty, made it to the field. Not that bad of a drive at all, other than the time. Wasn't a ton of traffic this morning, so I gotta be grateful for that. We're unfolding here. We've got just a hair over 300 acres total to spray. About 215 of that is going to be Zidua SC at 3 1/4. On top of that will be a quart of Res Plus, which is that biological stimulant that we have been throwing in on a few of these farms that this landowner operates on. The aim with that product is to enhance the speed of residue breakdown, releasing those nutrients for our growing crop, because a lot of nutrients are trapped in the soybean stubble and corn stalks from the previous crop, and it's nice to have those available for your new crop so they can grow with plentiful amounts of nutrition. Spray it at 15 gallon an acre. You're gonna have to fill up every bit of 4 times at this field. No big deal. Gonna pull in with the tanker here soon if he ever decides to show up. I'm surprised I beat him to the field. We're gonna knock this out. I'm gonna call my tanker driver and make sure that he's all right. I don't know how I beat him here. You good? Okay, all right, I just surprised I beat you here. That's what I was calling. Okay. All right, well, I just wanted to make sure you're all right. All right, see ya. There was just 2 trucks in the mix bay ahead of him, so that slowed him down. No big deal. Just really wanted to make sure there wasn't anything bad that happened. I'm not a fan of these 2 roads we use to access this farm. A lot of traffic and a lot that can go wrong, especially when you're driving a tanker. Let's hop out and load this because he's gonna be here soon.
I'm regretting not taking those back posts off completely when I took the rear boom off. I know that's what you're supposed to do, but they were kind of locked up in there. From now on, I'm gonna start removing them because they're kind of in the way here. I'm gonna have to pull up this a little bit. He definitely is vigilant enough to see that, but I'm just gonna get out of the way.
Just shy of 1,200 gallons in the tank. We're not really pushing our limits because we are going to have to fill up a few times here. No reason to spill an unnecessary amount of product, just to get as much in the tank as you can. There is still a tiny bit of moisture on the ground that is quickly dissipating. Ground conditions seem firm, so we're just going to go ahead and light this candle. I'm headed back to start spraying from my 3rd fill up. This has taken me a little bit longer than I was hoping because my boom auto height control, the NORAC system, was giving me some issues. Had to call the Hagee salesman. He had me flip a couple settings in here that seemed to have fixed the issue. The sensors were in hybrid mode, which is a mix of ground and crop sensitivity, and it does some estimating, and it must have thrown things out of whack because the minute we switched it just to soil only mode, it seems to have regained normalcy. So we got 130 acres sprayed right now, 215 acre field. We're going to try and get as much done as possible today, keep the hammer down. I'm definitely learning more and more about operating a sprayer by the day. The mistake I made this morning was starting probably an hour to an hour and a half too early. That frost did bring up a lot of moisture. The neighbor to the west was working ground. What he's doing and what I'm doing are a little bit different. You can afford a little moisture when you're working it. When you're spraying on top, you kind of cut some heavier tracks in areas. I didn't exactly leave any ruts, but there were a few turns around the waterways where I wasn't too happy with the tracks I left. So have to keep that in mind moving forward. Hopefully this is the last frost of the year, so we don't have to worry about that until next year. I've come to the conclusion that I'm actually even less of a fan of these silly power lines in the sprayer than I am in the planter, because the sprayer is not as good at compensating at low speeds as the planter is. So I'm probably going to be a little heavy on my application on this farm just because I had to go around about 6 or 7 of those, and a few of them may have brushed the end of my boom. They snuck up on me, I guess. I really need to improve on my logistical efficiency. I ran out after 205 acres. This big field I'm spraying here is 214 or 215, averaging 15.28 application rate. Basically, across the majority of this field, I'm putting down 15 gallons the acre on the money. There's areas though where I slow down around the poles, where to maintain the actual pattern and keep the nozzle bodies open with the minimum pressure, the pump has to speed up. And at that point, all I'm doing is putting on extra product. I'm not necessarily concerned about the Zidua hurting the beans. It's obviously not ideal. I'm more concerned about wasting product spraying areas like that.
That's definitely one aspect of running these size 6 tips that I'm not a huge fan of. It's definitely nice going fast through the field. When you're going around the outsides though, it's just not ideal. I would say the only difference between a farmer applicator and a custom applicator is the custom applicator probably has a mix master back at home base, dispatching loads, doing all the mixing, and just telling the sprayer where to go. I'm trying to keep track of acres while spraying so I can call in the right loads. Dad just called me a bunch of the fields I thought I was going to be able to spray today are still too wet, which is baffling to me, but that is the way it is. So I'm doing some math here. I think I got at least another 100 acres that'll spray. Got a 70, a 34, a whopping 9-acre field, so 113 acres. So I'll probably just call in 115-acre load because I know my acres are accurate. This big field I just sprayed, the 214-acre alleged field, actually sprayed like 225 acres. So we will see once the planner finishes up what the acres are, because the planner acres are very trustworthy. Sometimes the FSA acres or the Farm Service Agency acreage does not match the actual farmable acres, especially on a big field with a lot of roll to it. You may actually be farming more than you realize, which affects a lot of things, how much chemical you needed, final yield, seed needed, all that different stuff. So I'm trying to keep track of that. I'm actually going to call Helena right now and order another load of chemical. Nate, my brother-in-law that's driving the tanker, is going to meet me at a different farm, and then we're gonna go from there. I'm having to do a little bit of refiguring on my plans for the next couple of days. I thought I'd be able to spray everything that was worked, which is all we have remaining to plant, and then tomorrow hop in the planter and start knocking off these fields. Based on the reports I'm getting from my dad, it doesn't sound like a lot of these fields will even plant tomorrow. I've probably already mentioned that I'm surprised by that, just the nature of the beast with farming. It is going to be a little bit warm this afternoon, in the mid-60s, hopefully a slight breeze. That could reaffirm my plans. You just never know. I'm going to do my best to be as productive as possible today. Just don't know how that productivity is going to look. Even the east end of this field that's got a little bit more lighter dirt and corn stalks on it is a little bit damper than I'd like. I don't know if it's even going to plant tomorrow, but it'll be close. Hey, do you copy?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you. After you pull out of the van, Helena, will you sit there for a minute in case I need you to bring me a little bit more here?
That's fine. I just pulled the stand, but...
Okay. All right, sounds good. This last 90 acres here has a little back piece to it. I got to fold up to get to it, obviously, and I swear that this little winglet lock is going to take years off of my life. Every single time I go to fold it, it's stuck. I don't know what direction it needs to go, but it's got to be a different direction than I've been going with it. When I bought this sprayer, I pictured myself getting more done in a day than I have to date. Maybe we'll get there one of these days. I will say that using the crescent wrench to loosen it up is much less frustrating than having to jerk the sprayer back and forth. And I would imagine it's easier on the sprayer too. Okay, once this is folded up, we're going to follow the yellow brick road there next to this nice pond. There's a bridge that looks kind of sketchy. We're going to go back there and get to the back piece. What could possibly go wrong with this route? I could have gone around the pond and skipped this. Never been a big fan of making unnecessary travel though. So either this works out well or we're going to be towing this thing out of the pond. I'm not sure how I feel about this either. Here goes nothing. I close my eyes. Tell me when we make it over. Oh, okay, we're good. The really bad part about that first big 200-acre field spraying so much heavier than I'd anticipated is that I'm going to be cutting it really close to running out of chemical on this back farm. The tanker was getting a hot load. It was going to go back towards the main farm, but I circled them around this way, so if I run out, I could just top off real quick. Sprayed on the west edge really fast and then ran into the biggest issue of 120-foot boom, an area that is narrower than 120 foot. The neighbors planted. I could technically spray over on them, but that's just not good practice. Gonna fold up to 60, shut my in sections off, and then spray the rest. Okay, we're on 60, ready to rock and roll. The red lights there on the end mean that both in section controls are off, so just the middle ones are on. Took me longer to fold up than it did to actually spray that. Okay, back to 120 foot, which is the way I prefer it. And I ran out with probably 3 acres left. So what happens, you get a little bit of overspray on your average rate because you're going slower than you should be in spots, on top of an additional 5 to 10 acres you weren't accounting for, and next thing you know, you regret not just getting a bigger load out of the gate.
Okay, this is probably not our brightest idea. This ditch is a little long, don't want to go to the other side. Nate's just gonna pull it behind me here on the highway and we're gonna try and load, put the hazards on, hopefully everyone pays attention. I don't need but 100 gallons to finish this. I would like to reiterate that I would not recommend loading your sprayer like that, especially in what I realized was a no passing zone. So there's a lot of truck traffic on this road. Right in front of me, that mound is actually a garbage dump. So Waste Management has a facility here. They've got a lot of trucks on the road. And then over to the east on Old Route 316 is the rock quarry in Charleston. That gets a lot of traffic hauling gravel. There's some concrete one direction, there's an asphalt plant the other direction. Needless to say, there's a lot going on here. Felt bad blocking the road. It just kind of seemed like a necessary evil to get this done. Oh well, on to the next one. Did you see that? My boom folded up without any issue there. It both locked into place correctly and folded back up correctly. I think we may be getting this figured out. I was originally going to stop at a field right west of the city of Mattoon. Dad kind of nixed that idea, so I'm headed southwest of our main farm. Don't mind me, just pretend I'm like a very large car or something. No need to be intimidated. And yes, I can barely see out of this thing. That is one of the downfalls to sprayers. There's not a great side view picture when you're crossing across things. I have found one major flaw to road travel through more urban areas with a sprayer. I don't know if it's the size of the tire, the PSI on the ground, or if I'm missing the stoplight sensors. This thing is not activating stoplights, so this one up by McDonald's that I'm about to cross, I have to wait for another vehicle to come on the other side to activate it. Normally, if you were in a vehicle, within 30 seconds of pulling up there, you'd have the light switch because it knows you're there. This Hagee must just be elusive. I'm betting that empty, there's actually not enough weight on the ground to register the sensor as a car there. I had the same issue on my motorcycle years ago. The issue is that I would go after waiting long enough, except for I can't see that great on both sides of this thing, and I'm afraid to pull out on a red light and hurt someone. So I just sit there in shame until someone else shows up and activates the light. Okay, looks like we lucked out. There's cars coming to the east, so they should activate the light for me. Unless they all turn right, then they won't. So I'll let you know how long I have to sit here. Looks like the stoplight wins again. Hopefully someone shows up soon and activates this for me, because this is taking a while. Okay, I've got a question for y'all. Let's say, hypothetically, I got tired of waiting because I'd been there for 4 or 5 minutes. I had pretty much established that the light was not going to function properly, and I chose to just go after I had made sure there was no traffic coming. Did I commit a crime? Again, this is purely hypothetical. I would never knowingly commit a crime. Just curious about the legality of that decision, because the light was not going to change, and I've sat there multiple times on multiple occasions, establishing the fact that that was the case. I don't know why the Hagee's not activating the light. It's got to be a weight thing. I've even tried swinging over wider before on the way to that farm in particular, and activating it, no luck. I hate having to rely on other traffic because all of the cars behind me that were leaving McDonald's were stuck behind the sensor pad. Basically, I had to have a car coming from the west to actually make that work. And they did, eventually. I feel it's necessary to reiterate that that was a hypothetical question. Looks like I'm not the only one out spraying. Our neighbor Jason's got his tindering rig out. Okay, we are at our next field. It's a nice, dark 70-acre field that I'm sure is plenty dry now. The best part about this drive is that we did not commit any crimes on the way here. To our standard soybean residual blend, just 3 1/4 ounces of Residual SC at a 15-gallon per acre rate with our carrier that is water. I have a report from my drive. I saw 2 sprayers running, I guess 3 if you include me. That one guy that was doing some tillage right next to the farm I was spraying up there that looked a little bit wet. And lastly, there were no field cultivators or planters. That pretty much confirms that it's not dry enough to plant or do dirt work. One-off person doing tillage isn't always a green light to do it yourself. We're gonna go ahead and knock out this 70 and a couple other pieces and see what our ground's looking like. Maybe if a little more dries, we can go get some more herbicide, spray more. Looks like there's another sprayer running about 2 miles to the north. I can't tell for sure that it's a sprayer. I'm just basing that on speed because that's about the only thing that goes that fast through the field. I'd really like to get up there and get the last 120 acres planted on that farm we were just at. That may be a job for tomorrow though. And it's gonna cool off again tonight, not gonna freeze, but it will bring that moisture back up, which is what happened this morning. That cold weather really brings dew up. This is a nice flat field, so we're gonna go ahead and bump down our base height on the boom to 24 inches. Keep it nice and low to the ground, make sure we're getting good coverage. Some of those hilly farms, like where I just was that had the roll, I like to bump it up to 30 or 36 inches. Gives me a little more room for air. I only drug my boom one time on 315 acres, which is something I'm proud of, given my record the first few days of spraying. These are the types of field that really bring up your productivity average. Flat, somewhat square, no power lines across it, straight in rows, minimal overlapping, as easy as they come. I wish we had more like this, especially because this is some real good dirt. Should be done here in less than 10 minutes. Won't even have to fill up twice. I really should have timed that one. That's probably the fastest I've ever sprayed a field per acre. I was just cooking through there. I've got enough product in the sprayer to cover the remaining ground that my dad scouted and gave the okay to. I'm feeling confident that the rest of it will probably be dry by the time I get these other ones done. We'll wait and see though. I knew it was too good to be true. My boom's locked again. Time to head out with the crescent wrench. You guys can stay in here and hold down the fort while I fix this. Got a good feeling about this. Presto, changeo, foldo. Ah, look at that. It's like magic. The next farm is a whopping 34 acres, surrounded by trees. Multiple different parts, actually. So, it'll be fun. I'm offering my deepest condolences to the family of the squirrel I just flattened. I'm sure he did not survive that ride. It happens. Hey, I think I recognize that farm over there to the west. Got all my small fields knocked out. I'm gonna park this at home and then go do some scouting. Find a nice out-of-the-way place to park this, and then go look at some fields. And possibly grab some lunch, because I'm about 5 hours overdue for lunch. There's a sign, if I've ever seen one. Tillage going on just a couple miles north of my dad's house. Looks like it's working up pretty good. It is soybean stubble though, so it is going to dry quicker. Coming up a little bit heavy for my taste. Black dirt farmers north of town are rolling. They must have missed a little bit of the rain. That's coming up pretty nice out there. Taking that sprayer to that first farm this morning taught me a valuable lesson about the acres of the farm. I had it penciled in at 214 acres total. It's sprayed 225, so it's somewhere in the middle there. I'm sure I had a little bit of overlap. I only have enough seed for 218 acres. So I went to Ryan Sullivan, the Beck's dealer in charge of that, and got a handful more of those 33, 37 XtendFlex Beck's beans because I don't want to run out tomorrow when I'm planting, and I'd rather have them on hand if they've got extra and deal with returning them later. You can definitely see why Dad didn't want me spraying that field today. There are some heavy spots out there. I'm probably just gonna go up to Helena tonight, get the hot load for a couple hundred acres, let it sit at home. That way first thing in the morning I'm ready to go without needing a driver to run up for me. Looks like my grandpa's getting ready to work some ground and also have some tile put in. You can never have too much of that tile. It definitely turned into a beautiful afternoon. The ground did not dry nearly as much as I was expecting it to. I'm gonna run up to Helena. Hopefully maybe tomorrow we can get a lot done. Definitely gonna be doing some planting. Coincidentally, my scouting trip and route back to the semi leads me right back by our corn and soybeans are out of the ground. We're gonna hop out real quick and see if there's any evidence that there's damage. The ironic nature of frosts is that the areas that are most likely to get a frost are also the same areas that should be slower to emerge. Specifically, usually around the ditches. I don't know if it's because it holds the wind a little bit or if there's just residual moisture making its way in. Either way, we do have some soybeans out of the ground right here. They're definitely not feeling that great. You can see some brown on the outer edges of the leaf. The real question is, did it kill them? Some of these may die. Unfortunately, the growing point for soybeans is out of the ground here. If they got a hard frost, it will kill them. The only thing we have going for us that if it's light enough damage in terms of population reduction, we planted a high enough original population to not have to worry about it. Either way, these definitely have seen their better days. There's still a little bit of green on them, and they do have some stiffness still. There's life in the stem. I guess we'll have to wait and see another couple days because it'll be pretty evident which ones are alive and which ones are dead. Oh yeah, definitely got these poor little souls. No big deal, the corn will actually just shoot right back out. It's gonna be so cold for the next week or two on average that it's not like we're gonna be losing a lot of growing degree days anyways. Obviously, much like the soybeans, this is not what you want. There's much worse things that can happen to you though. It's hit or miss. There's a lot of them here that have seen their better days. Some of them may come out of it without having to regrow from the growing point. Others are gonna have to start fresh. Corn doesn't need replanted. The soybeans may be another case. I would say 90% of this field had emerged too. That's the worst part about this deal. You can row the corn. Looks like we had fairly even emergence. That just goes to show you what it's like dealing with Mother Nature. She's a tad bit temperamental. Without a doubt, I still stand by the choice to plant this field and the other fields. These are our only ones out of the ground. It shouldn't be that big of a deal when it's all said and done. I believe this corn last year actually got a frost along the edge and in the field in certain areas. It didn't really suffer because the final yield was 245 dry, and this is not tremendous dirt by any means, so it was still a victory. We'll have to see what happens out here. I've been trying to decide all spring what job I think is the most enjoyable. Obviously, every job is important in its own right. It's not like you can plant without field cultivating, you can't control your weeds without spraying, you can't plant without the seed tender, and you also can't stay sane without someone bringing you lunch. Either way, I boiled it down to what I would say is the cushiest job, and that's running the field cultivator. I think that if I could pick one thing to do, it'd be running the 9620R on that luxurious cab, pulling a 52-foot field cultivator, running 50 plus acres an hour, knocking it out and having a good time with some music playing. The obvious issue with running the planter or the sprayer is you also have to be worried about the quality of work you're doing, along with making sure you have enough supplies in your implement. If you run out of seed or you have the wrong seed, that's an issue. If you run out of herbicide or you have the wrong herbicide, that's an issue. Field cultivating, as long as the field cultivator is in the ground and you have enough sweeps, you're probably good to go. I guess, long story short, if I'm picking one, it's a field cultivator. We are northbound for another load of Zidua SC. One of our neighbors a few miles north on the way to Route 16 west is really big on the cover crops. He works in rye seed in the fall with his vertical till, and then he plants into the living cover crop in the spring. I definitely have my doubts about this practice for a few reasons. At the same time though, I'd really love to try it. I think that there is a lot of validity to that approach. On top of all the agronomic mumbo jumbo, it also just outright looks pretty good. Growing rye is a pretty nice cover. There's the Roll King headquarters. Wonder if they've got some herbicide I can stop in and pick up. We're almost here, and the northerners are just chewing away at some corn stalks. Looks good up here. One moment you're pulling in, the next you're moving out. It's crazy how fast they can load you here. I was talking to the mix master up at Helena, Doug, and he claimed that another farmer said he saw 27 degrees Fahrenheit this morning on his temperature gauge or thermometer, wherever he had it. I believe the farmer in question is located north of town. There's not that big of a swing from north to south of a town in terms of temperature. That could explain why our corn and soybeans look so ill right now. It's really amazing how a few degrees here or there can be the difference between replanting a bunch of crops and having a successful start without any issues. More neighbors up the road spraying. I'd say tomorrow's gonna be a pretty busy day. Other than being a nosy neighbor, it really was not that eventful of a drive home, which is the way I like it. We're locked and loaded, ready for a good day tomorrow. With very little rain in the 10-day forecast, as well as below average temperatures, we're not gonna get in too much of a hurry. We're very close to being done and may have some more to do after the weather events this morning. Either way, we do have a special visitor showing up tomorrow. Some of you will definitely recognize him. He's pretty notorious. You'll have to tune into the next episode to see exactly who it is. Anyways, that's gonna be it for me. As always, I greatly appreciate every single one of you continuing to tune in and support the channel. Your viewership means the world to me. I'll catch you all in the next episode. Until then, make sure you like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace!